Is Donald Trump casting the next season of The Apprentice or choosing a judicial nominee for a lifelong appointment to the Supreme Court? Because by the looks of the last few days, it's hard to tell. Trump is treating his nomination to fill Justice Kennedy's seat like another reality show, building suspense, setting a self-imposed deadline, and teasing his get-to-know-you interviews. According to reports, we know he's already met with 4 federal appeals court judges, and today the White House confirmed that Senator Mike Lee of Utah spoke with the president on the phone about the position yesterday. The president plans to announce his pick on Monday. Joining us from the Washington Post, national political reporter and host of Washington Week, Robert Costa. Matt Miller's back with us. Robert, you write about this today. Take us through your reporting, and I follow you on Twitter. You've been updating your reporting all day. Take us through where things stand at this hour.
Real quick, Nicole, a couple things to pay attention to. The former Kennedy clerks, you have Judge Kavanaugh and Judge Kethledge. They are certainly high on the list right now, along with Judge Coney Barrett from Indiana, who is very popular with social conservatives. But it's really the debate over Kavanaugh that I'm paying attention to in my reporting. Some social conservatives are scrutinizing his rulings on health care and abortion, wondering if he's conservative enough. Senator Rand Paul is privately raising questions. Kavanaugh is liked by White House counsel Don McGahn, who has been supportive still behind the scenes. But where Kavanaugh goes in this process, to me, is what is the important thing to watch. So,
Robert Costa, Brett Kavanaugh is a former White House colleague of mine. He is one of the most intelligent people I've ever worked with. He's also incredibly decent. I don't know if that counts for you or against you with this president, but I picked up today that there was an effort by White House officials to make sure that former Bush administration officials and allies didn't say anything too nice about Kavanaugh because that might hurt his chances.
That's an important point, because we've been told at the Post that the president is quite aware of the Bush connection, that he served in George W. Bush's White House. And the president is a political animal as much as he's making a legal and judicial decision here. And he knows his base is paying attention, will probably rally to whomever the president selects. But at the same time, the president doesn't want to be seen as too much of an insider. He did pick Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court last year. Kavanaugh is widely liked, as you say, by many Republicans in Washington. And at this point, Kavanaugh very much remains a front-runner along with Judge Coney Barrett. But the president is hearing out the criticisms. Doesn't mean he's tilting in a certain direction, based on my conversations with White House officials.
Matt Miller, let me ask you to pull back the lens a little bit and read you something from the New York Times about whoever he picks, what they might face in terms of their role on the court. This is a piece by Paul Butler, law professor at GW. People under the cloud of investigation do not get to pick the judges who may preside over their cases. By this logic, President Trump should not be permitted to appoint a new Supreme Court justice until after the special counsel investigation is over, and we know for sure whether there is evidence of wrongdoing. This would be dangerous regardless of Mr. Trump's legal shortcomings, but this president has, by his own admission, already taken steps to thwart an investigation into his own potential criminality. Both Democrats and Republicans in the Senate should therefore resist calls for a quick confirmation process. Otherwise, there will be a stain on the legitimacy of this nomination, on the performance of whomever is confirmed, and even on the Supreme Court itself. Do you agree with that? And do you think there's any chance that this can be slowed down? It already feels like a runaway train.
I do agree with that argument. I think it's a very good one, that no man should be able to pick who prosecutes him. No man should be able to pick who ultimately sits as the judge and jury. And we know there are several questions in this investigation that could ultimately make it to the Supreme Court, whether a president can be subpoenaed, whether a president can pardon himself. So it is a very real argument, I think. The question is whether it's one that has any salience to Republicans. I think when you see Democrats making arguments right now, they're really fighting a two-front battle. The first is to make sure that no Democratic senator either no Democratic senator ultimately votes for whoever Trump nominates, but even before that, that they don't commit early, that they keep their powder dry, so Democrats in the Senate keep their leverage for as long as they can, so they can execute what is the second part of that strategy, and that is to try to pick off that one Republican vote that they need. I think you'll see them making this argument. You'll see them making arguments about Roe versus Wade. You'll see them making arguments about preserving health care. Whether any of those can ultimately be successful, I think that depends on how the hearings go. It depends on whether something disqualifying comes out about one of these candidates in the vet. You can't count on that, but that's why you try to keep every Democrat committed for as long as you can, so in case something happens, you're in a position to block the nominee.
Robert Costa, let me ask you real quick, and then I want to get your thoughts, Paul Butler. Are you aware of anyone in the White House counsel's office scrubbing all of the potential candidates for this vacancy for their opinions about whether or not a president can be indicted, their opinions or views on whether or not a president can be subpoenaed, their opinions or views on things that might pertain to the Mueller probe?
No, and it's because the process, based on my reporting, has been quite contained. It's Don McGahn and the president and the candidates inside of the Oval Office meeting. McGahn has been with the president since the start. He's well aware. He's had his own clashes with the president over the Russia investigation, has been interviewed by Bob Mueller. He's well aware of the sensitive nature of all of that. And so they're trying to keep this process relatively at a surface level, knowing the president's been briefed. The Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation and others have gone over the candidates' records, provided files to the White House. So this is really about a rapport with President Trump, and that's how the White House privately says they'd like to keep it, to avoid getting in any territory, whether it's Roe versus Wade or it's the Russia investigation.
I am sure that Robert Costa is absolutely right about what they strive for at a staff level.
Right.
But I am also sure, Paul Butler, that Donald Trump wants to know where all the nominees come down on whether or not you can indict a president. And if he has to figure out Google by himself, you know,
well,
he's going to get to the bottom of it.
And he already knows, because his selection process has been outsourced to the Federalist Society, which is this very conservative right-wing organization of lawyers and law professors who've given him this list of 25. And they would not let anybody on this list who was not against Roe versus Wade, who did not support marriage equality, who was not against affirmative action. So all of these things with this fifth justice, they're gone. So this is extremely important. But again, this is something that President Trump actually does really well. This is one presidential authority that he knows how to do. So the Gorsuch nomination
it's like
came.
The pardon button, right?
Exactly, yeah. But again, this is actually constitutional. So, you know, the Gorsuch nomination came 11 days after his inauguration, and it sailed through. This will be 2 weeks. We'll have that very dramatic ceremony on a week from yesterday, where he'll say, you know, America's next top Supreme Court justice is, and someone will appear.
Paul Butler's ready for late night.
Yeah, exactly. Trump knows how to pick the heels. He knows how to pick the heroes. He knows how to keep bad guys coming back and people wanting to pay attention to more. I look at this because, look, we know he's not reading anything, right? Like, he doesn't really care about what the legal ramifications are. Somebody gave him a list. They narrowed it down. They gave him some crayons, and he's going to pick the top 2 or 3 people that make the most sense, that don't offend him when he has a personal meeting. So that says to me he probably picks a woman. That's probably what he's going to do. And he'll probably pick Barrett because he feels that that's the kind of thing that the Democrats wouldn't be strong enough to go heavy against her, even though she'll be just as conservative as everybody else, especially on issues like Roe versus Wade.
Robert Costa, let me give you the last word. You write about her in your reporting today, too. Where do you put her? Sort of middle of the pack, first runner-up? Who is she in sort of your Supreme Court watch process?
She is someone who I think is right there with Judge Kavanaugh. Probably, I would say, top 2 or 3 pick. But I did hear that Judge Ketledge, who's really been not really on the radar for many people over the last few weeks, he had a good meeting with President Trump on Monday, so he's in the mix. And the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, don't discount his favorite, Judge Thapar, who is seen as a strong nominee, potential nominee. For Judge Coney Barrett, she's seen as someone, if not picked now, she could be put on the court at some point should Judge Bader Ginsburg step down at some point. So she's being reviewed, White House officials say, for this seat and for the future as well.
All right, you just made liberals in our audience reach for the liquor cabinet. Robert Costa and Matt Miller, thank you for spending some time with us. When we come back,